The wise call it respect, because to truly respect another human being, you must first believe in their ability to endure the weight of their own life, and the moment you rush to rescue them from the consequences meant to shape them, you silently whisper that they are incapable of surviving without your intervention. This is the quiet arrogance hidden inside misplaced compassion, the desire not to help but to feel necessary, for many acts of kindness are nothing more than ego dressed as virtue. The rescuer feeding on the chaos of others, because without broken people to save, they lose their identity entirely, and in this dependency, they mistake control for love, forgetting that real strength is not in shielding others from pain, but allowing them to face it and rise. The Machiavellian mind sees this clearly and understands that help must be precise, purposeful, and selective, withdrawn the moment it begins to breed weakness, because your absence can often be the very gravity that forces someone to stand on their own. Yet the irony is brutal. The moment you stop rescuing, those who depended on your endless softness will accuse you of cruelty, will call you selfish, cold, heartless. Not because you harmed them, but because you removed the comfort that dulled their growth. And though they may never admit it aloud, with time they will respect you more in silence. A respect built not through affection, but through the revelation of their own competence. For the man who tries to save everyone becomes owned by everyone, while the man who saves selectively becomes a leader. But rescuing is only the beginning, because beneath this lies a deadlier form of kindness, a subtle poison wrapped in humility, the compulsive need to apologize for everything, even for things that were never your fault. The sixth act of kindness that destroys respect long before you even notice your dignity slipping through your fingers. Over-apology is the reflex of someone who has learned that peace is more important than self-worth. Someone who has been trained by life to believe that being liked is survival. And so they say, "I'm sorry," as a shield, as a bribe, as a desperate attempt to smooth tension before it even exists. It looks graceful, it feels mature, but it rewires the power dynamic every time it leaves your lips, because apology has value only when it costs something. Spoken too often, it becomes noise, a trembling confession of insecurity, a signal that your presence is negotiable. The world hears your constant apologies not as sincerity, but as submission, and people begin to treat you accordingly, speaking over you, correcting you unnecessarily, joking at your expense, because you've already declared you will absorb blame even when none belongs to you. Every unnecessary sorry becomes a small surrender, training others to believe that your emotions are inconveniences, that your truth is an intrusion, that your boundaries are optional. This is not kindness. It is self-erasure, and the over-apologetic are not admired for their grace, but tolerated for their silence, because nothing kills authority faster than fear of being disliked. Responsibility is the language of strength, not apology, and the strong do not apologize for existing, for having standards, or for speaking truth. They apologize only when they violate their own code, never when others are simply uncomfortable. But the weak apologize for breathing, entering rooms as though asking forgiveness for taking up space. And the moment people sense this shrinking of presence, they instinctively dominate it, not out of malice but out of human nature's response to softness without structure. Soon, you begin apologizing not for what you've done, but for who you are, for your intensity, your ambition, your feelings, your silence. Until one day you wake up and realize you've built a reputation as a peacekeeper rather than a person of value, a decorative presence who bends without being pressed. The world respects only those who stand firm in the face of misunderstanding, who allow silence to stretch without rushing to rescue the other person's comfort, because tension is the birthplace of respect. But the over-apologetic fear tension like fire, filling every moment of discomfort with explanations, softening truths that were never meant to be soft, surrendering ground that was never asked of them. And once people learn that guilt controls you, they will weaponize it. A sigh, a frown, a disappointed pause becomes enough to make you shrink, apologize again, justify yourself, and the cycle continues until your entire identity becomes shaped around the moods of others. This is why the Machiavellian mind embraces unapologetic presence, the ability to speak truth without permission, to walk into a room as if belonging is not granted by others, but inherent, because strength is not found in soft apologies, but in silent certainty. And when you do apologize, it must be sharp, precise, deliberate, spoken once and not repeated. For those who demand further repentance seek control, not clarity. Yet the moment you stop apologizing unnecessarily, the world, accustomed to your previous softness, will call you arrogant, cold, rigid. Not because you've changed, but because you've stopped allowing them free access to your self-worth. Their accusations are simply confessions of their dependence on your old compliance. But even deeper than apology lies another, kindness that rots respect from the inside, the kindness of overgiving, the endless generosity that begins as virtue and decays into vanity. The overgiver believes he is spreading abundance, but often he is buying affection, offering pieces of himself to avoid the terror of being unneeded. Giving becomes a transaction, an unconscious plea to be valued, and the receivers, though grateful at first, eventually sense the desperation beneath it. Human nature does not reward infinite generosity. It exploits it, tests it, expects it, turns it into entitlement. What once felt like a gift becomes an obligation. What once inspired gratitude becomes invisible, and the giver, believing he is loved for his kindness, is actually tolerated for his predictability. He pays for loyalty with self-sacrifice, not realizing that loyalty built on dependence dissolves the moment the giving stops. This is why those who give too much are eventually called selfish the moment they finally withhold, exposing the relationship's true nature as a disguised transaction. The Machiavellian mind knows that power lies not in giving constantly, but in giving strategically, understanding that scarcity creates value and unpredictability commands attention. The king who gives gold to every beggar loses his crown's meaning. The man who gives his time to everyone loses the weight of his presence, and even love, when poured without restraint, becomes suffocating. Overgiving also attracts parasites, people who sense your fear of being disliked and manipulate it through crises, guilt, and fabricated emergencies, draining you until you are empty and then moving on. And the tragedy is that the overgiver blames themselves, wondering why their kindness wasn't enough, never realizing the truth. Kindness without boundaries is a beacon for exploitation. To reclaim respect, you must learn the sacred art of saying enough, not from anger, but from self-preservation. And yet deeper still lies another act of kindness that devastates respect. The kindness of self-deprecation, the habit of downplaying your worth to make others comfortable, the instinct to respond to praise with dismissal, to treat your achievements as accidents, to silence your own brilliance so the insecure won't feel threatened. This begins as politeness, but ends as invisibility. Because when you insist you are small, the world listens and agrees. Modesty repeated becomes self-erasure, and the world does not reward those who hide. It forgets them. True humility is silent confidence, the kind that neither boasts nor shrinks. But false humility is fear disguised as virtue, the belief that to be seen fully is dangerous, that envy must be avoided by dimming your light. But envy cannot be avoided. It can only be commanded, and those who suppress their strength to prevent others from feeling small will eventually become the ground others walk on. Every self-deprecating joke becomes permission for others to belittle you. Every deflection of credit becomes an invitation for others to claim your work. Every time you minimize your value, opportunists step forward to use you, not because they are evil, but because you have taught them your worth is negotiable. The Machiavellian mind understands that visibility is power, and that silence is respected only when it comes from strength. Not timidity, but the most deceptive kindness of all is the kindness of silence. Staying quiet when truth is needed, enduring disrespect to keep peace, allowing lies to stand because you fear the noise of confrontation. Silence used strategically is power, but silence used to avoid conflict is decay, and the world can feel the difference instantly. When your silence comes from fear, people exploit it, taking your tolerance as permission, your discomfort as weakness, your boundaries as suggestions. And soon, what you merely endured becomes your new normal, shaping how everyone treats you. Peace without boundaries is pacification, a performance of calm that leads to quiet resentment. Because when you silence yourself to keep others comfortable, you become complicit in your own disrespect. And finally, the deadliest kindness of all, the kindness of endless forgiveness. The willingness to welcome back those who betray you, to reopen doors that should have stayed shut, to excuse behavior that corrodes your dignity, believing that love means unconditional acceptance. But forgiveness without consequence is self-destruction, teaching others that your loyalty is infinite, your standards optional, your boundaries imaginary. The forgiven lose fear, the forgiver loses value, and the relationship becomes an echo of repeated violations dressed as reconciliation. True forgiveness requires consequence, requires distance, requires changed access. Otherwise, it becomes indulgence, not virtue. The Machiavellian mind knows that mercy must be rare to be meaningful, that second chances must be earned, not assumed, and that love without standards becomes a playground for disrespect. Those who forgive endlessly do so not out of strength but out of fear, fear of loneliness, fear of abandonment, fear of the silence that follows a closed door. But loneliness is cleaner than betrayal repeated, and absence is more honorable than presence taken for granted. Boundaries are the true guardians of respect and forgiveness. Without boundaries is martyrdom disguised as grace. The world is not destroyed by cruelty, but by the unchecked kindness of those who cannot say no, who cannot walk away, who cannot demand standards. If you want peace, build boundaries. If you want love, require respect. If you want respect, stop begging for approval through kindness. Command your world through silence, selectiveness, and standards. For kindness without power is not kindness at all, but surrender dressed as virtue. If there is a truth men spend their whole lives refusing to confront, it is this: the world does not decide your worth. You teach it. Not through your achievements, not through your silence, not through your intentions, but through the boundaries you enforce and the standards you uphold. And nowhere does this lesson strike harder than in the moments when you allow disrespect to slide. When you permit subtle violations because you fear losing people more than losing yourself. When you swallow words that should have been spoken, convincing yourself that peace is gained through softness, not realizing that every unchallenged moment of disrespect becomes a blueprint for how others will treat you forever. Respect does not erode in explosions. It dissolves through small acts of self-abandonment, and the tragedy is that most men do not feel the corrosion happening until it has already hollowed them out, leaving nothing but a shell performing kindness to maintain relationships that died long before he noticed. And this is the quiet heart of part 2. The dangerous kindness that destroys a man from within. The softness that masquerades as virtue but functions as poison. The generosity that seems noble but robs him of strength. The tolerance that feels mature but signals submission, because there exists a kindness so destructive, so subtle, so deceptively noble that it must be dissected with ruthless honesty, the kindness of tolerating disrespect. It begins the same way most tragedies do, gradually, invisibly, harmlessly. Someone speaks over you and you let it go. Someone jokes at your expense and you laugh along. Someone violates a boundary you never clearly expressed and you convince yourself it's not worth making a scene. And in that moment, the very moment you silence your discomfort, you teach them a lesson they will never forget. Your self-respect is negotiable. Your tolerance is infinite. Your boundaries are flexible. People learn you through your reactions, not your intentions, through your silence, not your self-talk. And the moment you decide that being liked is more important than being respected, you have already lost both. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. It is far safer to be feared than loved, if love must be maintained through sacrificing your dignity. Modern society twists this into something softer. Be kind, be understanding, be patient. But the truth remains immortal. When kindness is used to avoid conflict, it ceases to be kindness and becomes cowardice. Yet cowardice rarely feels like cowardice from the inside. It feels like maturity, like self-control, like the higher path. And the world rewards you for it only temporarily. People will praise your patience, applaud your tolerance, admire your calm, not because they respect you, but because your compliance is convenient for them. No one respects the man who never corrects disrespect. They simply increase it, testing the limits, pushing further, curious to see how much of yourself you are willing to give up to remain easygoing. And every time you choose comfort over confrontation, you lose a little more of your own authority, your identity dissolving into whatever others demand you to be. You become a shapeshifter, not out of strength but fear, adjusting yourself to the expectations of those who do not even value you. And slowly, without realizing it, you become the safest person to disrespect, the one who won't react, won't confront, won't demand better, won't walk away. You become predictable in your softness, reliable in your silence, consistent in your self-erasure. People don't fear losing you because you've shown you are willing to lose yourself just to keep them. And then comes the worst part. Once you have taught people that disrespect is tolerated, correcting them later becomes almost impossible. They won't understand your newfound backbone. They will act offended, confused, insulted, as if you changed the rules without permission. And they are right in one sense. You did change the rules, but only because you finally realized you never had any. The Machiavellian mind sees this clearly. The world does not respond to your intentions, only your patterns, and once a pattern of tolerance is established, others treat it as truth. But why do men tolerate disrespect? Fear, not of people, but of the emptiness that comes with enforcing standards. You fear disappointing others. Fear confrontation, fear appearing harsh, fear being abandoned, fear being misinterpreted as difficult, fear losing connections that only exist because you have never demanded integrity from them. You cling to relationships that depend on your silence, your softness, your consistent self-betrayals, because the alternative, being alone with yourself, terrifies you more than being disrespected. But what you fail to see is that tolerating disrespect does not protect you from loneliness. It merely delays it, while ensuring that when loneliness finally arrives, it hits with twice the intensity. Because now you are alone and resentful, alone and ashamed. Alone and aware that you allowed yourself to be treated as disposable. The cure for disrespect is not kindness, not patience, not explanation. It is consequence. Consequence is the purest language of respect, understood universally without translation. Because consequence is the currency of self-worth. The man who enforces standards without raising his voice holds more power than the one who explains his boundaries endlessly. Explanations are for those seeking permission, but consequences are for those who understand their value. And the moment you begin to enforce consequences, real consequences, not emotional threats, you will see a strange thing happen. The same people who once dismissed you will begin adjusting their behavior, not because they suddenly love you more, but because they recognize that your tolerance is no longer limitless. Respect is not built through kindness. It is built through clarity. The Machiavellian mind is not cruel. It is simply unconfused. It understands that to allow disrespect even once is to rewrite the entire relationship, because disrespect is not an isolated act, but a test of character, theirs and yours. Every disrespectful moment contains a question. What will you do about this? And your answer determines everything that follows. Most men answer wrong. They laugh, they shrug, they minimize, they internalize. And in doing so, they betray themselves. The world does not respect the agreeable. It respects the immovable. Those who can remain calm without yielding, compassionate without collapsing, kind without becoming prey. Strength is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It appears in the man who is willing to walk away from any table where respect is not present. The man who does not chase closure, apologies, explanations, or validation, because he understands that disrespect speaks for itself. People reveal who they are when they are careless, and it is your job to believe them. And yet here lies the final paradox. Once you stop tolerating disrespect, your life becomes quieter. Fewer people, fewer distractions, fewer superficial relationships. But the silence is not emptiness. It is peace, the peace that comes from no longer negotiating your value. You become sharper, colder in the right ways, softer only where softness is deserved, and the world begins responding to you differently. People choose their words more carefully, treat your time with more reverence, speak to you with more intention, not because you demanded respect verbally, but because you emanate a presence that no longer tolerates anything less. This is the evolution Machiavelli understood. Respect is not given to those who crave it. It is given to those who can live without it. To those whose standards remain constant, whether surrounded by admirers or utterly alone. And in this transformation you will realize the deepest truth of all. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, you stop needing kindness as a survival strategy, because kindness becomes a choice, not a weakness. You offer it from abundance, not insecurity, from power, not fear, from clarity, not chaos. And in that state, your kindness becomes dangerous again, but this time in the right way, controlled, intentional, strategic, and never at the cost of your dignity.